I don't think I've been this excited since I realised this morning that my glasses could be fixed and they weren't irreversibly broken. Last night, or this morning if you're me, considering in the UK it was at 1:30 in the morning and finished at like 2, the new Elden Ring game, Nightreign, was announced. And there is so much to unpack here. A lot of people have been saying that this is just a simple spin-off and that it's got no lore significance. But this couldn't be further from the truth. There is so much here, and I really can't wait to talk about it. Not to mention, story-wise, it does actually make quite a bit of sense, even though people are saying that it doesn't. I'm not going to waffle on, because I just want to get straight into this juicy meat pork steak thing, and just sink my claws right into it. So please, sit back, relax, grab some succulent, juicy, tender, and sensational prawns if you want, and enjoy. So what is Nightreign? Nightreign is a bit different to what Fromsoftware and their studios and everything to do with their kind of IPs have been in the past. Nightreign is in fact kind of like a co-op multiplayer game, although you can play it solo. IGN of all people have already played it in an early version. From what I've gathered from what they've said, it's kind of like a zone encroaching. It's set into 3 days and each day is 15 minutes. All the while this is happening, this sort of night effect, which you can see in the trailer, spreads towards a centre point where you then fight a boss. Whether that be the bloody nameless king or the centipede demon, which is, by the way, absolutely mental, but it does make a lot of sense. And we're going to talk about it a lot more in depth in the lore part of the video. Now, basically there's 8 characters to choose from. They're different skills. Some are more dexterous, some are more nimble, some are a fucking mage and takes mage combat to a new level. It's a really innovative idea and I'm really happy that Fromsoftware is branching out and making use of the Fromsoftware Elden Ring IP. Now, I've seen a lot of talk that it isn't actually Fromsoftware that's developing this, but on all the media, not to mention the Bandai Namco website, Fromsoftware's label is attached to it and it says from Bandai Namco and Fromsoftware. And this makes a lot of sense because in previous interviews, Miyazaki has said they are working on multiple games at the same time in this current moment, so it's been there all along. Adding further on to this, in previous interviews, Miyazaki has said along the lines that he really likes the idea of the seamless co-op mod and he'd like to use it in the future. So there, again, it's been there all along, we just didn't know where to look. Now, when is this releasing? In the description of the trailer, it says in 2025. Now, this is subject to change, but if we're looking at the trends of when Fromsoftware's games have released in the past, I imagine it will be in the first half of the year. So we're going to see this probably really soon. Much sooner than we anticipated, and I for certain cannot bloody wait. I'm really curious to see what you all have to say because I am so excited. I know a lot of people are a bit shocked by it, a bit confused, but I think this is going to be a once-in-a-lifetime game just like Elden Ring was. Now for the part you've probably been waiting for, a breakdown of the trailer and a lot of details that from the few videos that are up at the moment has been majorly missed. I just want to say before we get to that, a small percentage of the people that watch these videos are actually subscribed. If at the end of the video you have enjoyed, please consider leaving a like and subscribe as it greatly helps the channel. As soon as the trailer starts, there's tons of secrets. It very much looks like the landscape of Limgrave, except it is very, very different. Now, it has been stated in interviews that they do take different parts of the elements and mix them together sort of randomly to create these randomly generated areas for each round. But even considering that, there are tons of structures straight away that aren't there in the base game. You can see the gate front from near Stormvale, but apart from that, all these different structures are very, very different to what we've seen previously in Limgrave. This says to me that either this is very far in the past or very far in the future. And I'm actually going along with the idea that it is very far in the future. Now, a lot of people have immediately said this is an alternate universe. Main reason for that is it's confirmed to be a standalone game. But I don't think that means exactly what other people think it means. A standalone game, in my eyes, is something that can be consumed and watched and played without having prior knowledge of the other game. Further proof of that is it's literally called Elden Ring Nightreign. Its story and its lore is still associated. Straight away, we actually see these dark black, tall figures which loom over Limgrave. Now, it's unknown exactly what they are, but it isn't just some pareidolia, it's not just some mistake where we're seeing shapes and figures in objects which really aren't animate. They move. And they are seen all throughout the trailer in the background. Now, as we're going to get onto later in the video, Dark Souls seems to be officially connected to Elden Ring. Something which I've said for a really long time. For example, Humanities and Grace literally look like the same thing. But getting back onto the point, Humanity, at least the ones inside of Dark Souls 3, which this seems to be more focused on, considering there's the Firekeeper and the Nameless King. These dark figures in the sky, they're black, which is the Humanity's colour. The key's in the details for the next part, because we actually know where this is in the next scene. So basically, if you look at it, there's this new castle which isn't there in the base game. But if you look in the background, there's a bridge which is eerily similar. Taking into consideration this is Limgrave, this looks really similar to that portion of Limgrave when you go down from the gate front and you reach that bridge. It looks exactly the same. Not to mention the canyon there further proves this, considering there's also a canyon underneath the bridge. Located in this snapshot, there's also a rise which is associated with mages. This is mega super important due to the title of the game, Nightreign. Not to mention, later in the trailer, it talks about a Night Lord. I believe that Nightreign is set after the Age of Stars ending, and my reasoning for that we will delve into more when we get to that part in the trailer. There's these growths which appear over the castle in this frame, which I find very interesting. To me, it looks between a mix of the coral-like stuff inside of Caelid and a mix between the kind of stuff you see when gravity magic appears, which is really fitting considering gravity magic is purple, and there's these purple bits which pop up everywhere. The next part of the trailer shows us that whole sort of zoning in, zone kind of aspect that I talked about in the beginning of the video. What I find really interesting is the fact that the flames look like ghost flames, which are associated with the Nox and the underground. What's also coincidental is the title of Night Lord and Nightreign is also to do with the Nox and to do with Ranni. I repeat, this is definitely not a coincidence, and to my knowledge, Fromsoftware and Miyazaki has not once said that this would not be canon. The idea of this just being some alternate what if is hearsay, and it's people coming to their own conclusions from what little information we do have. The next few scenes go through the motions of what we've already seen, until we get to a curious part where we actually see this zone-esque element overtaking some ruins. The interesting part about this is the gate front. Albeit it has been very much modified and upgraded and then destroyed and then probably rebuilt again over the time period. Further down that way, you can actually see the town which accompanies the gate front. Only now, it's so much bigger. After the end of Elden Ring, something must have gone good at least to some aspect for things to have continued building, or perhaps it was really shit and they just managed to build stuff. I'm leaning more towards the second option, considering everything we're going to talk about. In these images, you can actually see something which honestly compounds an idea that I've had. You'll see these giant figures but more defined. I truly believe that these giant guys are the original giants, the ones we see in the Mountaintop of the Giants and Caelid. There's no other candidate in my opinion. They are so massive. So massive even by Dark Souls and Elden Ring standards. It would also explain why they look like apparitions and they look like they're ghostly figures. It's because they're just that, ghosts. They're wandering spirits wandering the lands between. Nothing too interesting happens in the next few scenes, just showing us stuff we've already seen in those first few clips. We see the character running for the first time, which is really cool, a new animation, which shows they aren't just copy and pasting stuff, which in my opinion sets a good precedent for the game. It's when we get to the part with the bird that things start to ramp up. Now when I first saw this, I lost my shit. Let me give you some backstory real quick. A long time ago, before Marika, Limgrave was ruled by the Stormhawk King and the Stormhawks that followed him. Now we can find his item descriptions, we can find his spirit summons, and yet this spirit summon that we see inside the trailer looks eerily similar to a Stormhawk. It's got the colouring of the ghost flame, but also looks like a spirit summon. I'm beyond convinced that this is some relation to the Storm King and his dynasty, which makes even more sense when you consider we actually see the Nameless King later in the trailer. Now you might be thinking, hey, that makes no sense, but it really, really fits in. For example, the Nameless King is also known as the Storm King. The Nameless King has no name. We don't know his name. Likewise, the Stormhawk King has no name either that we know of, only his title as king. A bit of a coincidence? Absolutely bloody not. It is not a coincidence, and I am definitely convinced there is some relation between the Nameless King, Storm King, and the Stormhawk King. The Stormhawk King has always intrigued me, and the idea that we're finally getting some lore on it is something that I am beyond giddy about. The woman narrating the trailer calls us Seekers of Redemption. She says that we've been thrown together by forces beyond our control. At this very moment, we cannot know what these forces are, but considering the Age of Stars ending seeks to rid the world of the Outer God's influence, I think it's fair to say that it failed, or at least Rani was in fact lying to us and we were manipulated the whole time. In the next part, we see this colour palette which is very reminiscent of Scarlet Rot. You'll also see this spider crawling. Now, Scarlet Rot is always associated with this colour palette, not to mention the sort of arachnid forms are all over the Scarlet Rot. Look at the pests. They're basically a massive centipede and they've got all spider limbs on them. Considering Nightreign seems to be Elden Ring's world but way in the future, hell, so far in the future that the landscape is basically unrecognisable, I think it would be really cool if this is some extension of the Scarlet Rot Lake we find in the underground of Elden Ring's world. Perhaps over millennia and millennia that lake has drained and it's been left with this, where it's got a light drizzle of Scarlet Rot water at the bottom, but it's gone elsewhere. I think that would be awesome and it'd be such a cool area. And then we bloody see the centipede demon from Dark Souls 1 and just Dark Souls in general, which is just like... I had 7 consecutive aneurysms and my colon has just been blown. Now, just because it's the centipede demon does not mean it's the one that we killed. There could have been multiple different centipede demons. As we know, Izalith had all sorts of manners of demons. Then we get this sick montage of the new characters just going absolutely hog wild, just like full nuts to butts, full throttle action, not to mention some Sekiro prosthetic shit. It's just awesome. For a brief second we get this image which really looks like the stairs leading up to the central part of Stormvale. Perhaps it is, perhaps it's not. Not enough angles to really say 100%, but it's definitely a possibility in my opinion. Now buckle your britches next, because we see a fucking Zamor Knight, and this is incredible for so many reasons. You have the fire giants, but then when the fire giants descend, their descendants become the trolls, shrinking in size. Now it's always been my theory that the same occurred for the giants. They were around, their descendants became the fire giants, so on and so on. We also see a parallel, whereas in the trolls betrayed their ancestors, the fire giants, leading to their doom, and the survival of the trolls. I've always thought that perhaps it is exactly the same, for in the Mantle of the Giants we are told of this kind of civil war between the Zamor Knights and the fire giants, Ice and Fire, which is a kind of a reference to George R.R. Martin, but it also shows us an internal conflict in the region. Add on to that the Zamor Knights were apparently aligned with some kind of ice dragons. Add on to that fact, again, double time, the fact that the giant figures inside the sky are probably, most likely, the giant skeleton inside of Caelid and the Mantle of the Giants. And I think you've got a good case that whatever this game is about is going to have a lot to do with the Zamor Knights and their war. As if things couldn't get any crazier, we actually see the Firekeeper from Dark Souls 3, and I'm not shitting you. Same colour hair, and then if you look at her face, you can actually see the eye mask she wears in Dark Souls 3. This is a really interesting development, and I think I know where in the timeline this is set. In the ending of Dark Souls 3, one of them is when you snuff out the flame with the Firekeeper at your side. She speaks a few words which at the time were taken as a metaphor of things coming full circle. But now things seem a lot more clear. She says, "But one day, tiny flames will dance across the darkness, like embers linked by lords past." She's talking about the age of darkness which we had ushered in that ending coming to an end. And that seems to have happened inside this trailer. She is here, walking amongst the light. I absolutely love this edition, not to mention the fact that it's kind of a sequel to Dark Souls 3, which, I don't know if you know, but Dark Souls 3 is one of my favourite Fromsoftware games. It is a masterclass in storytelling, and I'm so happy the story's being continued. We then get some more clips where it shows us more of this new mount that we can use, which, by the way, I love this mount. It is so cool. It's basically the glider from Breath of the Wild on steroids. The interesting part comes in the city we see next. This city looks identical to the Nox cities that we see in the underground. The Nox were banished underground long ago, and considering they want a Night Lord, presumably to be able to return to the surface, it makes total sense that given the opportunity with Ranni now as the god of this new era, they'd build new cities atop the land, and this is exactly what I believe it is. I believe this is a Nox Eternal City. Only now they haven't got to fake it till you make it with the night sky. They've got the perfectly real one up above. I'm going to be real with you, I have absolutely no idea who the guy narrating over this bit is, but it's a male character, which is definitely different to the Firekeeper. We then see the nameless king, who is riding upon his storm drake. Earlier in the trailer, the Firekeeper talks about us all being thrown together through forces beyond our comprehension. Inside of Elden Ring, dead people can be brought back to life. For example, the Tarnish. They were touched by grace, and they rose again. I do not see why that cannot be the same for the nameless king that the protagonist inside of Dark Souls 3 kills. I believe that these characters, barring the Firekeeper, were brought back from the dead by an outer god. When she says beyond our comprehension, that screams Lovecraftian, that screams outer god, and I think it's exactly that. Now, for what reason? Is it an opposing outer god who doesn't like the night rule? The answer to that is up to your interpretation. I'm really curious to see what you all have to say, but I genuinely think it's a lot more plausible that the nameless king, who is, by the way, son of a god, would be able to come back to life if we, who are lowly Tarnished, just so happen to be able to, and as so many others do, like Fear, Dung-Eater, so on and so on. Who, by all accounts, yes, are strong, but they're not some demigodly being. And again, another example of a dead character we see talking is Morgott. A lot of people might feel it's cheap to bring him back, but I think it is so much more beautiful than that. You see, Morgott was the only one of his demigodly siblings who was not born with the grace of gold. He was not graced with it, and yet yearned all his life for the feel of grace. Wouldn't it be so poetic, after so much hardship, another outer god gave him what the greater will could never, what his own mother could never? I think that would be a beautiful roundabout way for his story, and I would love it so much. Then we get tons of showcases of all new stuff which is going to be inside the game. Which, by the way, if you see that Sekiro parry, oh my life, I quite literally, I don't have any words to say how excited I am for this Sekiro parry. It is amazing. I love Sekiro's combat. Mixing that with Elden Rings is just a wet dream come true. Shit really hits the fan double time though when you get to these three dogs. Now, first of all, they're awesome. You know, you can't deny that. But there is so much more to them. First of all, I did see someone say, if you look inside Malekith's boss room, you'll in fact see three wolves standing around a figure. Hell, there's three wolves here. Is that a coincidence? Maybe, maybe not, but it's something to think about. The interesting part comes from the shackles. The shackles are in these weird diamond patterns, the kind of which we see associated with Radagon, with his impenetrable thorns, and on the statues. It's not a coincidence. Not to mention the red wolf inside of Raya Lucaria is in fact Radagon's red wolf. Would it be so far-fetched to think he also has other wolves, those being these three wolves which have so much significance? You've also got to look at the boss arena, which looks exactly like Radagon's boss arena. Got all the flags reaching up into the sky. The interesting part though is if you look at the background, you'll see these tall trees reaching up into the sky. I'm 100% certain these are arch trees. We see them inside of Elden Ring, we see them inside of Bloodborne, we see them inside of Dark Souls. They are everywhere, and they seem to symbolise, at least in Dark Souls, different worlds. Now you'll see there is only one. there's only one arch tree which is still standing upright fully, the other is crooked. I believe this is showing how time is converging upon each other. We see this kind of in Dark Souls 3, where time is just all over the place. But I think this is a deeper explanation into how that occurs, and perhaps we'll finally get some really big answers. I mean, all we can do is hope. And now for the part that I've wanted to talk about since I first started this video. And that is the ending, where it talks about claiming the life of the fucking Night Lord. This is crazy for so many reasons. The main one being is, we are the Night Lord. The Tarnished that we play inside of Elden Ring is by all accounts probably the Night Lord. The consort to a god is most commonly known as a lord. We've got Elden Lord and then we've got Night Lord, which is something the Nox wanted to create. The Nox were not gods, so likely this Night Lord would be a consort to a god. What are we a consort to inside the Age of Stars ending? Ranni, who is a god. Only difference is we are not Nox. We are a being, a Tarnished, who ascended to the rank of Lord and married a god. The Age of Stars ending has always rubbed me the wrong way. I have never thought it was particularly good. Ranni takes things to the absolute extreme. She killed many demigods on the Night of the Black Knives she did not need to kill. Not to mention she abandons and destroys everything around her. I like her character because I think it's so complex, but there's no denying that she's very self-centered. If you look at the state of the world inside of Nightreign, you'll see that it looks worse than Elden Ring originally did before Ranni came around. I don't think the Age of Stars ending is as good or as pure as people seem to think it is. If we go along with the idea that perhaps she did actually want to do good, that also failed. Because by removing the influence of the outer gods, it allowed something else to crawl back in, as seen inside of the trailer. The Firekeeper talks about forces beyond our comprehension bringing us here. That sounds like outer gods, but wasn't it Ranni's plan to rid the world of outer gods? Or at the very least, when it came to the Lands Between, doesn't really make much sense. Unless you consider either it failed, or that was never the plan to begin with. I don't think it was the failed part, because if we're the Night Lord, which it very much seems likely we are, considering we are the Lord of the Night, Ranni's consort, we are alive, so Ranni must be, or at least in some capacity, still functioning for us still to hold this high position of power. It's all so confusing, but something that definitely puts a definitive pin in us being the Night Lord is when it talks about claiming the life of the Night Lord, we push open a door. Only if you look at this door, it is the Erdtree's door. The one where the impenetrable thorns were originally. Not to mention, you can see the Erdtree's leaves and branches above the door in a specific scene. It's right there, and I'm 100% certain we are the Night Lord, which is so cool. It's like the Solar Cinder in Dark Souls 3. You're fighting the culmination of everyone's playthroughs. Different playstyles, mage, combat, dexterity, strength, you name it. And I absolutely love it. I've also got to mention, at the end, you can actually see our spirit summon, the little hawk guy, and the Firekeeper lying on the floor. I don't know what this means, I don't know the significance, but I really wanted to mention it. Another thing I wanted to mention about this, inside of the actual trailer, we see some kind of spirit ash summon-esque element to the hawk, yet in this image, it looks alive. Well, not alive, but it looks like it has just been alive before dying. That would explain the spirit ash summon element and effect we see on the hawk. Perhaps it dies and it's brought back to life by some outer worldly being. I don't know, but I am so curious to find out. Sadly everyone, that is the end of the video. My god, was it a long one. It's 24 minutes. That's probably the longest video I've done in a really, really bloody long time. I really hope you did find it informative and that you did find out something you didn't know in today's video. It's been such a long video that I'm not going to ramble on anymore. Please, don't you dare go hollow, friends, and may you find your worth in the waking world. Goodbye, everyone.